Hey everybody, welcome to the webinar. We're going to start presenting in just a couple of minutes. We are awaiting a few more attendees to join in. Thank you. Right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, depending on where you're connecting from. Welcome to yet another exciting Citrix Ready technical webinar, where we showcase how Citrix and our partners like Guardicore here with us today have integrated to deliver valuable products and solutions to common problems faced by our customers. I'm Anil Kumar, your host for today. I'm a technical marketing manager in the Citrix Ready program. I lead the security partner ecosystem, working with a lot of technology vendors focused on security, like Guardicore here with us today. A little over 12 years of experience in the IT industry. We also have our main speaker from Guardicore, Garrett. He's the AVP Sales Engineering at Guardicore. Hey, Garrett, welcome to the webinar. Could you take a moment to let us know what you do at Guardicore?
Sure. Thanks, Anil. Very happy to be here today, and it's nice to meet everyone. As mentioned, I'm Garrett Weber. I lead our solutions engineering team for North America. My goal and job here is to help organizations understand the value that Guardicore can provide and show them how we can help them micro-segment and achieve the business outcomes they're looking to around zero trust, mitigating ransomware, achieving different compliance. Really just help them understand that Guardicore is a solution that is scalable for them to implement a segmentation strategy within their network.
Perfect. Pleasure to have you here, Garrett. And today we'll see how Citrix and Guardicore can help enable remote access to a lot of companies out there, and also see how Guardicore in particular can help reduce that attack surface and prevent that lateral movement and virtual environments. So let's see what we have in terms of the agenda. We'll obviously see how the hybrid workforce has evolved over the past year, and how it's increased the attack surface and how we can protect it. We'll see Garrett's gonna explain how their products micro-segmentation is gonna work and help protect our virtual environments. There's going to be an really lively and exciting demo followed by it, and we'll be monitoring your questions throughout the webinar. Please use the GoToWebinar control panel to post your questions. We'll be taking them during the webinar and also after. And before we dive in, since this is a Citrix Ready webinar, to the folks who've not heard what Citrix Ready is, we are a technology partner program where we evaluate and evaluate partner products on Citrix's products for compatibility. And once we go through the thorough validation and validate the products, we basically brand them as Citrix Ready products. We onboard the partner vendor as a Citrix Ready partner, and we have a huge and online catalog of Citrix Ready products, Citrix compatible products in our in Citrix Ready marketplace. The link below, citrixready.citrix.com, should lead you to the marketplace, and you can find Guardicore and many other compatible solutions of Citrix available there. All right, so before so let's dive right in. So we all know the workforce is going to be hybrid going further, but how did it really evolve to the current state? So we know most of us are still continuing to work from home, and even after the pandemic, which could be quite some time from now. A lot of companies and employees would prefer to work from home. A lot of our companies are already deciding to keep the workers in a hybrid model where a few employees would come to the office a couple of days in a week or so. So workers are continuing to be mobile, and with the evolution of cloud and the proliferation of SaaS apps, a lot of C-level executives are already thinking about or already moving to the cloud and SaaS environments. And with that, they'll also have to think about how they're gonna move away from the traditional security perimeter and start using the security available in the cloud. And with all those workers moving mobile and the app sprawl, the threat vector has only increased with employees working from anywhere they want, accessing internet and SaaS apps and their regular work applications from the same managed or unmanaged devices. It's only increased that threat surface, and the threats are obviously rapidly evolving. So the security executives are going to think about how to increase that security and build that trust, and in turn drive productivity. Here's some of the technology trends which Gartner has provided to us through their various surveys and research. And it also has provided some of the challenges implementing in them. So obviously there's a lot of interest in moving to the cloud. They say about 60% of enterprises will move to the cloud and face away from using VPNs for remote access and start using or start facing into zero trust network access solutions. But the challenge is obviously providing that unified employee experience. The increase in remote workers obviously leads to with 82% leaders allowing their employees to work remotely means they also have to provide a consistent experience across locations, and it shouldn't really matter which devices the employees use. And with all this said, security has been critical over the years, but with the sudden shift due to the pandemic, where everybody started working from home, security is key with a lot of remote workers, BYOD devices, and employees using unsanctioned apps. So the traditional approaches, traditional perimeter-based security is inadequate, and it obviously will impact the business. So to rephrase, these are some of the security challenges with what existing security architectures present. fragmented user authentication mechanisms, which means employees have a lot of URLs and different usernames and passwords to access their various applications. So it's not helping them in terms of productivity. They are choosing weak passwords, and weak passwords obviously leads to breaches. VPNs lack granular access, which means once anybody is into the VPN, they get access to everything inside the company. So that's not going to work anymore. BYOD and unsanctioned apps and devices is another level of threat altogether. So the security architecture is obviously needs some app optimization to support this new hybrid workforce model. So like I said, the apps are modernized. Companies have started to use various public clouds, various SaaS applications, and everything. But when it comes to security, it's still the same traditional perimeter, and it poses challenges like there's lack of governance, there's a lot of application sprawl, there's multiple different URLs and access points for employees to get their work, which is obviously hampering their productivity, and there's very limited visibility and scalability in this particular security model. What's really required and what Citrix Workspace provides is this holistic approach where we provide that single point of access to all their applications. It could be in the cloud, it could be in their data centers, it could be their file shares, traditional and the modern cloud drives and everything. Uh, Everything in a single access point with one username and password with multi-factor enabled. And what we also provide is contextual based access, which means the workspace using our security analytics is gonna always measure the risk score of the user in terms of where they are logging in, what's the device posture, and things like that, and basically support all kinds of devices and apps. It doesn't matter. We provide that unified experience and contextual based access, and backed up by continuous monitoring and assessment. So we have that entire Gartner-defined SASE stack through our secure workspace access, which basically provides that zero trust capabilities, the secure internet access, which provides a whole lot of features for internet-based applications, including malware protection, CASBs, DLPs, etc. And we obviously provide that unified experience and edge security through our SD-WAN solution, and everything can be controlled and managed by our unified plane in the Citrix cloud, which basically helps protecting the hybrid workforce and with maximized productivity and reduced risk. And what we also do is we work with a lot of industry leading vendors and partnerships, including Guardicore and many more, as you can see on the screen, to build that rich experience for the customers. They really do not have to rip and replace what they have. We have these partnerships and compatibilities built around these solutions, and customers can really leverage all our partner ecosystem solutions. And with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Garrett to explain how Guardicore integrates with Citrix and helps provide that micro-segmentation and reduce the attack surface by preventing lateral movement in virtualized environments. Garrett, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Anil. Yeah, if someone can give me the presenter controls, I will share away.
There you go.
Okay, perfect. All right. So thank you again for everyone for joining us today. I'm hoping to basically explain to you how Guardicore helps secure virtual environments focused around lateral movement and reducing that attack surface. Using the virtual environment as the gateway into the network is a great way to get your users access, but then you have the responsibility of securing that access within the environment, and how do you handle that? So I want to start off with really discussing some of the trends that we've all seen over the past year. We just covered a lot around the remote workforce, but we've also seen that ransomware attacks have had a renewed resurgence, and they're becoming increasingly disruptive especially over the last 6 months or so. Third parties and the vendors that you have a relationship with have become a point of compromise because attackers are now exploiting the weaknesses in their security postures. And then that shift to remote work has just made the endpoints even more vulnerable and exposed and interesting targets for attackers. Each of these trends and the associated attacks have something in common in that they all typically start out with some system or service that is exposed and communicating out to the internet. But then the real damage comes into play by the way the attackers can move freely and laterally within the environment. So how can we control that lateral movement within the environment? Most organizations, they look to their firewalls to be that enforcement point, but a legacy firewall, an appliance-based firewall, is ineffective at restricting lateral movement and preventing against ransomware because they're difficult to deploy. They don't inspect all of the traffic in the environment, and their rules are normally overly permissive because there's a lack of visibility and understanding of those applications. So as we're implementing those rules, we're typically not as precise as we'd like to be. More and more organizations now are actually moving towards micro-segmentation as their new best practice for controlling lateral movement and reducing the impact of a breach, even as this security landscape continues to evolve and that attack surface we're managing continues to expand. So why are organizations turning to micro-segmentation with Guardicore specifically? Well, the answer is fairly simple. Micro-segmentation with Guardicore is faster to deploy and implement changes. It greatly reduces your risk and in many cases can reduce the attack surface of critical applications up to 99%. And lastly, micro-segmentation with Guardicore is much more cost effective, both in that initial purchase of the solution, but also the total cost of ownership as compared to legacy appliance-based firewalls. Let's define micro-segmentation for anyone on the webinar today who's not familiar with the term. One way to explain micro-segmentation is by referencing the design of a ship. Ships are designed in such a way that one compartment can be breached and take on water, but the breach does not spread beyond that compartment, therefore not impacting the rest of the ship. Guardicore implements micro-segmentation as a way of designing your network for resiliency by using segmentation and access control policies to restrict lateral movement within the network. This way, a breach of one system, one VDI or one virtual environment in this scenario cannot be the jumping point to allow for that lateral movement that's spread into the environment that impacts the rest of the applications. Micro-segmentation, it offers you kind of a unique ability to gain visibility into the communication paths and then apply security policies to the internal traffic based on the workloads, applications, the users that are interacting with each other, whether that be on-prem or out in the cloud. The approach really aims to implement a least privilege model to access control and ensure that all workloads, end users, and applications are limited to only accessing the necessary systems and applications to do their job and perform their function. What you see here in the visual is the e-com user and the DBA have different levels of access based on their identity and applications they're using to access that e-com application, even though they're both using VDIs delivered by the same Citrix host. We also implement policies within the application to ensure that when the e-commerce application servers access the database servers, they can only do so by using the SQL application running on the database. Any other unauthorized communication would be blocked. Then we have our compromised endpoint. This endpoint is denied access to the e-com application because it doesn't meet the requirements of the security policy that is put in place for accessing the e-com application. That ring fence, as we call it, around the e-com application acts like that watertight compartment on the ship, preventing the attack from moving laterally and impacting the application. So how does Guardicore help limit lateral movement and really improve your security posture in a Citrix environment? So our goal is to assist you in implementing that least privilege model to providing application access from the virtual environment, whether that be via published desktops or published applications. We go beyond managing the initial authentication and allow you to implement a zero trust architecture between the Citrix virtual environment and the applications hosted in your data center and clouds. We can do all this in a manner that is highly scalable. It doesn't require changes to the network or downtime of those business applications. You gain visibility into every user and application communication flows, so you can not only ensure that they're not accessing the applications and data that they're not allowed to, but you can also see what they are able to access and what applications they're using to establish that access. Building this least privilege model into your Citrix security posture will not only help ensure business continuity and reduce the impact of a breach, but it will also allow you to proactively address ransomware, third party, and the remote work risks that we talked about earlier that a lot of organizations are struggling to deal with right now. Let's talk about how the identity-based segmentation with Guardicore actually works. So first, we install the Guardicore agent, so icons here, on the Citrix hosts themselves. The agents allow us to visualize the communication flows for every user, and it also acts as a firewall. We then integrate with Active Directory to leverage these security groups that you've already defined for managing user access within the environment. Guardicore then applies security policies to those groups and allows or denies access to the applications in your data center or cloud based on a user's identity. This scenario, again, it's supported for both your Citrix published desktops and published applications. It requires zero downtime and zero changes to your network to implement. So the idea is to give you a really quick to deploy, easy to scale model so that you can start allowing users access to only the applications they need and restricting that potential for lateral movement or unauthorized application access. So before we jump into some of these specific use cases, I want to take a minute here just to pause for questions. So Anil, I know you've been monitoring the chat for me. Are there any questions we can address now?
Yes, we have a couple of them, Garrett. Yeah, so far a great presentation and really interesting how it works in Citrix virtual environments. But a lot of our users and customers are moving to our subscription-based model, which is on our Citrix cloud. Have you guys tested Guardicore in our cloud Citrix cloud environment, and how does the support look like?
Yeah, absolutely. We're a Citrix ready partner for the Citrix cloud environments as well. The solution itself is designed to be agnostic to cloud environments. So wherever the Citrix cloud is supported, Guardicore can function in that environment as well.
That's perfect. And the second question is what's happening currently. A lot of one of the customers had to move they had to move remote all of a sudden, but they had a lot of they do have a lot of old Unix servers in their environment. So can Guardicore still do segmentation with legacy applications on non-Windows based machines?
Yeah, that's a great question. So micro-segmentation itself is a newer technology, and you find a lot of these vendors only support newer, more modern operating systems. So that's not the case with Guardicore. We understand that even as you go through your digital transformation, you still are going to have some legacy applications and legacy systems running on old operating systems, Windows 2003, AIX, Solaris, Red Hat 4 and 5. So the Guardicore supports a very wide variety of operating systems, including those legacy operating systems that are still running in the environments that we just can't move off of yet.
That sounds really awesome, Garrett. Thank you for that. And I think those were the couple of them we had for now. We can continue with the presentation.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 3 use cases for using Guardicore in Citrix environments, and then we're going to get into a short demonstration of the product. So first, here is the traditional multi-users using a single Citrix host to access applications in the data center. The way Guardicore handles this is the agent is installed on the host, and then we use those security groups to define which teams have access to specific applications. So we can see here that the analytics team, Andy in particular is a member of that team, he needs access to the accounting application, but he doesn't need access to this DMS application. So we restrict his access to it. Then you have Doug, who's a member of the DevOps team. Doug has no reason to access the accounting application. So we restrict his access based on being a member of the DevOps team, but ensure he has access to the DMS application, which he needs to use to do his job on a daily basis. So in this scenario, you can have dozens and many users on an individual host being served up their VDIs and their published applications and still limit their access to only specific applications in the data center that they should need to use. Think about this from a third-party perspective as well. As you're using those B2B relationships and other vendors, and they're coming into your environment, you only want them to be able to access the specific applications and systems you need them to support. This is a way of limiting their application, their access to applications, and ensuring that you have that least privilege model and that you're still allowing your end users to access what they need, but you're really locking down those vendors coming in from third parties to reduce the risk of what they can see and touch within the environment. The next use case here is peer-to-peer isolation. And this comes into play it's a very strong play for how do I reduce the risk of malware proliferating within the environment. There is no reason in most scenarios for my system to talk to a Neil's system. I just don't need to access his laptop, his desktop, his Citrix VDI. There's no reason for that. So what we see organizations doing with Guardicore is just blocking that peer-to-peer, end-user access. So if I get infected because I clicked on that phishing link and I installed that piece of malware in the background without knowing, that piece of malware can't start to move to other end-user systems within the environment because it just has no reason to. There's no reason for my system to access other people's systems. What we do is we ensure that the IT users, the administrators who need to help with desktop support, they still have access to other systems based on their security group information, their role within the organization, because they need to be able to do their day job. So we give them the elevated access because they need it within the environment, but we make sure that other end users' systems can't talk to each other, really restricting that potential for lateral movement between those systems. And as the final use case, I'd like to really spend a minute talking specifically about ransomware, because this is the most disruptive threat to any organization right now. And it's really more important than ever that we're building out a ransomware strategy. So Gartner has laid out a nice, complete set of steps for us to think about when we're building that strategy. They've recognized that while prevention is always key, it's still necessary to detect, remediate, and recover quickly in order to bring the business back online from this disruptive attack. The Guardicore solution offers a really comprehensive suite of techniques and tactics for preparation, prevention, detection, remediation, and recovery from a ransomware attack. So how does this apply to that Citrix environment? It's pretty simple. Both the use cases we just discussed with Guardicore's identity-based segmentation align well with the Gartner guidance on prevention and detection, ensuring that your Citrix virtual environments cannot become that jumping off point for a ransomware attack to begin. Instead, the malware is contained to the individual user session and unable to move laterally without being blocked and detected. So while me in that scenario, user 0, my system may be infected, the rest of the environment is safe because the malware itself has no way to move laterally and establish that larger foothold within the environment, which has become a crucial step in a ransomware attack. So when you think about the way you're preparing to prevent and then detect and respond to a ransomware attack, a micro-segmentation solution is actually a really great tool for doing that. It complements your EDR solutions really well, and you can have a great 1-2 punch for how do you handle segmentation, how do you handle remediating, responding to, and preventing that ransomware attack. All right, before one last thing to talk about, and then we'll jump into the demo, I just want to take a minute and describe, before micro-segmentation, how would you do what we just talked about with legacy firewalls? In some ways, the answer is you wouldn't, but what you would try to do is plan and implement multiple pools of VDI hosts to run in different networks, and they're typically purposely built to support specific user communities. So the user's traffic is routed through firewalls with really complex ACLs to try and ensure that they can only access the VDIs for that specific user community. The pools of VDI hosts then have different images that need to be maintained and updated, and this already is starting to sound really complicated, but I'm not even to the point of actually controlling access to your applications yet. In order to do that, you pass the traffic through another set of internal firewalls that has some rules restricting access to specific applications. These rules are normally port and protocol based, but sometimes they also include the user identity depending on the firewall vendor you're using. But then after you do all of this work, once I'm connected to that first hop, there's likely nothing beyond that's actually filtering traffic to restrict me from moving laterally to other applications and systems. So for higher cost and more complex management, you really end up with a poor security posture in the end anyway. This is why micro-segmentation and the approach of Guardicore and Citrix combined gives you a better way of delivering the access to the applications and controlling lateral movement with the users once they're in the environment. All right, let's jump into the demo. So here we are, we're into the Guardicore Centra security platform. Hopefully this is coming up on your side. I think it's almost there. What I'm looking at first is this is the first use case we talked. Okay, cool. Looking at the first use case that we talked about. And here we are allowing access to different applications based on a user group and a person's membership of that user group. So we're saying, even if you're on the endpoints, if you're on that part of the environment, you can only access the org portal application if you are an org portal user. And when you access that application, you can only use Chrome to access the Nginx service running and listening on port 80 TCP on the front end. So that org portal user group cannot access the database servers or the application servers. They can access the front end of the org portal application. This is what I want them to access. This is that least privilege model. They can only see what I'm giving them access to. They can't see beyond the front end of the application. Same thing here for the e-com users. Same policy. But in this case, we're saying the e-com users can only access the e-com production application over port 80 TCP if they're using Chrome, and Chrome is connecting to Nginx running on the e-com application. The last rule here says endpoints can't access anything else in production. So at the end of your list of authorized connections, you have this default catch-all rule that blocks anything that's not previously authorized. This is your way of implementing that zero trust model and ensuring that only the rules you put in place to allow for authorized traffic are going to let end users access those applications. Anything that's not authorized gets blocked. I want to show you this in a visual format because I mentioned Guardicore gives you full visibility into the application flows. So here we have some VDI systems, and we have VDI hosts, and it's delivering 2 different actual virtual desktops to users. If I look at this Chrome process, I can see that user Doug is allowed to access the org portal. He's part of the org portal users, but he's not allowed to access e-com. He's not an e-com user. He has no reason to access that application. I can also look at the other connection and see that Adam can access the e-com application because he's an e-com user. He cannot access the org portal application because he has no reason to. So really simply, you've taken a couple of rules to restrict access to different production applications based on someone's role within your organization. And you can also visually understand how they're accessing those applications to verify whether that traffic, those connections are being allowed or blocked as they're connecting into the production environment. I didn't have to build out separate pools of VDI hosts to do this. I didn't have to build out complex firewall rules and a layer of firewalls both on the front end and on the internal traffic. This is all done in software. So there's no complex setup to maintain. We use your Active Directory information that you've already put in place for allowing user access. And we can say based on the application that is establishing the connection, which users are allowed to access which applications, and also ensure that they're only accessing the parts of the application that they need to do their job. So the second use case, the peer-to-peer isolation, this is even easier from a rule standpoint. I start with that catch-all rule that blocks any endpoints from talking to each other. Because remember, my endpoint, my device, has no reason to talk to Anil's or anyone else's. So let's just block that traffic right out of the gate. Then I have a rule that says, you know what, my server admins, they can get to the endpoints. They can, in this case, remote desktop over. Maybe they use specific applications. They have a certain suite of tools they use. We can limit it down to say they can only use a specific suite of tools that they use for administering these systems. But we're mitigating the risk of malware moving laterally within the environment with 2 really simple rules. One that says, don't let endpoints talk to each other. Another that says, you know what, our server and system admins, they need to access these endpoints to do their job. Let's allow them a little bit more access into the environment, but let's make sure they can only remote desktop. They're not going to be able to use WinRM to move around the environment. They're not going to be able to use PSExec to move around the environment. We're going to restrict what they can do and how they can do it, even though they're administrators and they need a little bit of elevated access. So when we look at this visually again, Guardicore is all about how do we give you a good understanding of the traffic flows. So I want to give you another visual representation. I see here that we have Doug connecting between, or trying to remote desktop between these 2 systems. It's blocked. Doug's not a server admin. Doug is a normal user. He shouldn't be trying to remote desktop between systems. Maybe Doug has been compromised. Maybe he's a negligent user. Maybe he's just curious and poking around the environment, but we've made sure that Doug cannot get from one system to the other. And here we have Carl. Carl's an administrator. he needs to be able to remote desktop between systems to help support them. Doug called Carl and said, hey, I'm having an issue on this system. Carl needs to be able to remote between one system and another to provide that support. So we allow that access. You can tell, hopefully it's apparent visually, the red line here that's dotted shows block traffic. You can tell by the connection type. And the other connection going across is established, just the traditional black line that shows that Carl was able to connect across to the other system. So really easy to implement rules. They're in a human readable format. You can easily see that if I'm on an endpoint and I'm a server admin, I can use remote desktop to connect to other systems in the environment. None of this required any changes to the network. None of it required any downtime of systems or applications. So this allows you to quickly address reducing risk within the environment without long, drawn-out, complicated projects to plan downtimes, plan network changes, plan re-architecting of the environment. Guardicore is what you call an overlay technology. We'll take the network, as complicated as it may be, we'll start to simplify it for you, and we'll start to supply that segmentation and that risk reduction. All right, that wraps up my presentation and the demonstration. Anil, are there any other questions that we should address?
Great. First of all, great presentation and demo, Garrett. I think it was very insightful for a lot of our audience here. Yeah, a couple of questions. So how easy is it to implement Guardicore for somebody who's been using traditional firewalls and now want to start using micro-segmentation, and probably they have a hybrid infrastructure of on premises and the cloud? How fast then can they start implementing and start applying those policies and really start seeing those results?
Yeah, traditionally what we see customers do is get the agents deployed in mass and start gaining that visibility, because the bigger challenge with how do I implement the firewall rules is normally how do I understand what's going on in the environment. So we get the agent rolled out, we start to gain that visibility and create those maps and those visual experiences to understand how users are accessing application and which applications are they using. Then that guides us into how do we implement security policies. It gives us a way to check and confirm that, okay, when I allow access between this end user group and this application, I want to make sure I know what application they traditionally use to access it, because maybe I don't know that information. So the visual information and the visibility data we provide helps guide people much faster through that rule writing process, because we see the ports and the protocols that are being used. We see the applications that are involved in the connection. You don't have to rely on application owners giving you that information. You can understand it from the system, so you can move much faster.
Right. So the next question was basically if we needed to install any agents for Guardicore to work. So I think you answered that. So I believe these are very lightweight and should be compatible on most machines.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually put in some capping on the resources to make sure that we don't impact CPU and memory utilization on the systems as well.
Right, that's perfect. I think that's all the questions we had for now. But do visit Citrix Ready Marketplace and look do a quick search of Guardicore. You should be able to see all the you should be able to find all the information about Guardicore, how to reach them, and also the products, Citrix products and versions we've validated Guardicore on. Great information available there. They are also part of the workspace security program, so you could visit that page and see some of the other products also. We have a whole security ecosystem available there, and the webinar is recorded, so we'll share the copies link to the recording in a couple of days, and it will go to the YouTube channel in a few days. So any questions, do reach us out at citrixready@citrix.com. Garrett, any final thoughts or comments before we close?
Just to thank everyone for attending and taking some time with us today. I really appreciate it.
Likewise, perfect. Thanks everyone for attending the webinar, and do look forward for many more partners to join in the Citrix City Technical Webinar Series. Thank you so much, and have a nice day, everyone. Thank you. Bye bye.